I'm Sara Lufstyle, and this is Influence to Equity. I will be joined by guests from a wide range of industries who all have the commonality that there's no perfect linear line to success or life. Together, we're gonna figure out what works for you, for what defines success along your journey. In the past 2 years, Emmanuel Acho has penned multi-New York Times bestsellers. He's won 2 Emmys, including a primetime Emmy for his extraordinary series, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, and a sports Emmy for his exemplary on-air work on FS1. He has a brand new show centered around him and stepping into the investor realm. Emmanuel Acho, welcome to Influence to Equity.
It is an honor to be here, Sara.
You better say that. That's a good answer.
It is.
So we've seen you everywhere. You're all over our TVs. You're on the internet. Tell us about the first time you were on TV.
Oh, gosh. The first time I was on TV, maybe 2013. I'll say the first time I was on... Okay, first off, calm down. I'm not that old. First time I was on TV at like a high level. I was on Fox Business Channel. I think it was a show called Varney and Company. I was playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. It was during training camp. We worked out on Monday to Thursday. Every Friday, I would take a car to New York, and I somehow sold them on this idea that I was the most qualified to talk about sports and business. I don't know how they believed me. That was Nigerian. What can I say? That was the first time I think I was on television nationally.
So you transitioned from the NFL to a broadcaster seemingly overnight. What do you attribute to your success?
I would probably say resilience. Okay. When I left the NFL 2016, I was like, okay, it's easier to get a job while you have a job. So 2015, I was still in the NFL, realized I think it's time for me to move on. So 2016, I go back to Austin, Texas, where I got my undergrad and master's degree. I emailed every news director in Austin and said, hey, I used to play for the Texas Longhorns. I would love to come on your show once a week, talk about the Texas football game the previous weekend, and maybe do some other fun segments. One station, Fox 7 Austin, they bid on that, and next thing you know, I have my own little franchise called Mondays with Manny. That was really how I got my big break, if you will. Very small break, actually, in retrospect.
That's a stepping stone, so it's a huge break.
It is. But I say in retrospect because everything I've realized in life is subjective. At the time, it was huge to me, but now retroactively, I'm like, oh, that was just a small pebble in what's hopefully going to be several rocks that build up the mountain of a career.
So did you have to put work in then?
Jesus. I was in Fox 7 doing that show Monday morning in Austin. Then I would drive from Austin to Dallas and do a show for the Dallas Cowboys, working out of the Cowboys practice facility. It's a 3-hour drive down Interstate 35, straight shot, Austin to Dallas. I'd be in Dallas from Monday to Thursday doing a show for the Cowboys. I would drive back to Austin because I was working on Longhorn Network, covering the Texas football games on Saturday. I'd have a production meeting on Friday morning. I'd be on air covering the game on Saturday. I was off on Sunday, and then on Monday it was wash, rinse, repeat. I did that for 17 straight weeks for 2 straight years. So that was the grind that's helped me get to the position I'm in.
Now, obviously, we're friends and business partners. As associates, we have had multiple conversations about how hard we work and how many hours go into what we do, right? I come into LA, I live on the East Coast, I fly out, take my kids to school, come back, stay for a day, leave in the morning, go out.
Superwoman.
I try. I do my best. Not all heroes wear capes. But I think there's an assumption that like we just woke up one day and this was like an overnight success. But I know once you were done with your career, everyone just thought you would get a weekly desk gig. You did something else. Why did you listen to your heart, your calling, versus what other people wanted you to do? Because Lord knows this is not the career that anyone expected from me.
Yeah, I think I was reading a book, either Atomic Habits, James Clear, or Hidden Habits of a Genius. And it says this great book, says this quote, and it stuck with me. Until you work as hard as a person you look up to, don't attribute their success to luck. And I think so often we're like, oh, Sarah's just lucky. Emmanuel's just lucky. And it's like, no, people work really, really, really hard. I get to watch you firsthand as hard as you work. I genuinely don't know how you do it, but you somehow do it, and it's miraculous, so kudos to you. As far as your question, I believe we have to identify the difference between career and calling. And I always say that. And I believe it was Steve Harvey who I first heard say, your career is what you are paid for, your calling is what you are made for. Now, very infrequently do those two things intersect, run perpendicular to each other, so to speak. Every now and then they do, but typically they may run parallel. And so you either function in life in your career or you function in life in your calling. Thankfully, mine have intersected, and my career, being paid to speak, simultaneously coexists with my calling. My calling, I just believe, is more purposeful, speaking about reconciliation, than my career speaking about sports.
Which actually leads me to my next question. You had the audacity.
Ooh, good word.
Thank you. I do what I can. You had the guts to come out in June of 2020, sit in front of a camera in a white room and speak for culture. You created a series and books and addressed racism in a unique way that really none of us had ever seen before. Uncomfortable Conversations. What led you to that?
Man, so when I first got asked that question, somebody said, Emmanuel, what was your inspiration for Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man? And I began to answer, but I caught myself because I said there was no inspiration. There was a devastation. Like, I was devastated into creating Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black man. I was devastated seeing the fractured relationships between our Black brothers and sisters and our white brothers and sisters. And I said, you know what? I can't sit here and watch there be such terrible communication and utter miscommunication between two people groups that have to coexist. What led me to creating it was a broken heart and realizing I need to do something. I wasn't going to go out there and march. I got bad knees. And so instead of going outside, I went inside and I began to speak.
What about the weight? Something that as an influencer turned into the career that I have now, I know one of the things that I feared quite a bit was the pressure and the responsibility that comes with influence. How did you feel taking on such a huge monster? Because that's a lot of pressure.
I didn't realize what I was doing at the time. And maybe had I known, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But you're going to get criticized either way unless you literally cease to exist. So you might as well get criticized for being you, doing what you love, being who you're called to be. I didn't think at the time that people would come out and, to some degree hate me for trying to bring forth peace. But I believe it was Galileo who was first discovering whether the earth was round or flat, and he was sentenced to house arrest. Several different artists over the course of time have been locked up, shackled, because they were disruptors. Now, I'm not going to put myself on the same playing field as Galileo, but what I will say is when you try to disrupt a culture, and the culture has so long been comfortable with oppression, been comfortable with racial tension, been comfortable with the status quo, when you try to disrupt that, people will always have issue with it.
Let me ask you this. What made you the right person? What made you feel like you could have the audacity to do it? And what did you learn about yourself in the process?
I think that everyone is uniquely qualified to do certain things. Once you figure out what you're uniquely qualified to do, then do that. I grew up in a Nigerian household, mom and dad, born and raised in Nigeria, but I went to essentially an all-white private school. So I was immersed in white culture and I was immersed in Black culture. And because I was fully immersed in both of those cultures, I fully understood how to speak that language. They say you can't be fluent in a language until you immerse yourself in the culture. I took 8 years of Spanish, and I was in Mexico just last week. And though I studied Spanish and I love Spanish music, I'm not fluent because I was never immersed in the culture. And so you might have a Black best friend or a white best friend, but unless you immerse yourself in these cultures, you don't actually understand the fluency of the culture itself. So I would say that those were my qualifications for being able to step into this moment and speak.
Now, this show is called Influence to Equity. So you took your influence, the business side. What does that look like? How did you structure the project?
If it don't make dollars, you better finish it.
Sense.
It don't make sense. Truly, the toughest part is when you're trying to do something altruistic in nature, it gets real funny internally, emotionally, spiritually to get paid for it. It gets real funny. Like, I don't like speaking at churches because I don't like charging churches to speak, but I don't like speaking for free. I always say I only talk to God for free, and if you call me on occasion. And
you still won't answer unless it's about the money. So
that's so true.
If it ain't business, you're not answering.
No, but how do you turn it into into how do you stay focused on the business of it all, I think we all have to realize like you are adding some sort of value in life and you should be compensated accordingly for the value that you add. You have to look in the mirror and have a real hard conversation with yourself, however, and say, what kind of value am I adding? And how should I be compensated for that value? But what I've realized is if you somehow, some way, whether by work or by happenstance, find your way being elite at something, you will be compensated very well for that thing, regardless of what that thing is. I was talking to my friend who helped choreograph Beyonce's Coachella, and he was telling me that like the choreograph leader makes X amount of millions of dollars. And I never would have thought about that. But I'm like, oh, if you're excellent to the point where Beyonce is calling you, you're going to get paid. So it's not so much chasing money, chase excellence and the money will chase you.
The thing that I appreciate most about you and as a content creator, as an influencer.
Wait a second. This could be a long list. The thing you appreciate most. I'm just eager to hear what you have to say. I'm like, there's several things. I'm just eager to hear. Like the most is a very like, uh-oh.
As a content creator, and if you're a brand and you've ever worked with me, or if anybody is listening and you know what it's like to work with me, I don't play about my money and I don't play about my kids and I don't play about owning the content that I create. What prompted you to make sure, because you really could have gone left, taken the immediate money, but instead you decided to fully own the content. Why?
I want to play the long game. That's really what it is. Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. I think we had now over 30 million views on episode 1, over 90 million views across all the episodes. And mind you, I've only done like 11 episodes. So you're talking about an average of 8 to 10 million views per episode. It's not like I'm cranking out 50 or 100 of them. I had offers to, sell, but I'm always thinking about you never want to oversaturate your product. You have to figure out like, hey, what is the value of your product? And you never want to oversaturate it. And ownership is a long game. So I wanted to make sure at all times I'm holding on to ownership of Uncomfortable Conversations, because also I am Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black man. Like I'm the Black man. So at the point in which I were to sell it off, you just get into hot water.
Yeah. So how did you feel then winning and collecting the Primetime Emmy?
It truly was the most humbling moment. I still remember when my publicist, Christy, first called and said you were nominated. And I was like, oh, snap. And then I'm sitting there in the Academy freaking studio watching everybody get nominated. And I remembered, Sarah, I said, I'm just going to listen for like, and the winner goes to, if I hear uncomfortable, as soon as you hear that, it's over. And as soon as I heard uncomfortable, my best friend who's in there in the audience, Chidi, lets out a yell from the depths of a Nigerian village. He's also Nigerian. I don't know. Earthly accolades don't mean everything, but it is nice to be appreciated for your work.
Sure. I'm going to switch gears for a second. You did TV, you're an EP, and now you're an investor, which a lot of people don't know you for. How did you get into it? Why? And tell us about the wealth management side, because my brother he made it.
Man, I would say I have to give a lot of credit to you. Truth be told,
I do what I can. Thank you. What was that part again? Could you tell me again?
Can we move on, please?
No,
Can we cut this out? Can we cut this out? Thank you.
You wanted the thing that I appreciate about you. I would like to hear the fact that I am
you
personally responsible.
You are definitely. Of all people, you were the most responsible for my investment portfolio, definitely. But here's what's crazy. I've also trusted you with way too much money. Like, now that I'm actually thinking about this, I've trusted you with entirely too much money. I'm going to tell a story. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell a story. It also might get cut out.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in my townhouse in Beverly Hills, and I just got done with work, exhausted. I just got done with work. Then I had to do a podcast. I burst a blood vessel in my vocal cords, so it hurts to speak. I finished a 2-hour show. I finished an 1.5-hour podcast. I get a text message from Sara. Hey, come with me to this place 2 hours away. It'll be worth your while. I said, Sara, I'm exhausted.
And I said, stop whining.
And then she said, the car's out front. And I was like, I opened the blinds in my townhouse, and there was a car waiting for me for us to go make what ended up being a very large scale investment. Prior to you, I was always trying to make investments here. There, several of them flopped, but they were learning experiences.
Of course.
Like, let's be real. Early on, I would always invest sweat equity, right? Hey, I'll offer you my brand, my name, my likeness, my image, my resources, and just give me, 1%, 2%. It might vest over time. But after flop and flop and flop, you were the first person of which I truly invested legitimized equity with. So that's how I got into it. Invest with people you trust, which is you, our very small team of friends who we invest with. Bet on brains. Bob Iger said that, former CEO of Disney. He said, bet on brains. So even if it's not an idea, if you bet on a person, you'll win.
I believe in that heavily. Thank you so much for my credit. Y'all heard that. We will be saving that for future use. I'm going to make sure that's the ringtone whenever you call me. Just a continual reminder of my greatness. But let's, I guess, focus on your greatness. Now you are in the centerpiece of a new show on FS1, Speak, making this a full circle moment for you.
Yeah.
Something that's been very important to me in my career is I've always had male advocates. I've always had males who opened the door for me, who gave me a seat at the table. And I do want to make sure that I touch on the fact that why was it important for you to carve out a space for Joy?
Man, yeah. So Joy Taylor, who to my knowledge is the only Black woman on a daily show that's an opinionist. She's one of the co-hosts sitting in the chair on the show. It was utterly important for this reason. I believe in the 10th man. And the rule of the 10th man. And the rule of the 10th man is if 9 people look at something one way, you want a 10th person to come in and look at it another way. Joy walked into our room today with all our producers, et cetera, and I think it was like 13 men. And she was the only woman, but she was the 14th. So I was like, yo, we might all look at an issue and be blind to something because we're all looking at it with eyes from lives that we've lived walking the earth as men. And you'll see something I don't even see. So I'm just big on diversity because I'm huge on diversity of thought. And, if I'm being honest, I would rob myself a greater creation of concept by not having a woman on it.
But let's be honest, how are you doing both? The business side, the investment side, you're a business owner, you're a TV host, and then you have creative control.
Intentionality. That's really it. If you're intentional about what you want to do, I don't think that anything is as hard as it is time consuming. And so really, I'm just very intentional, right? I want to be considered a creative genius. But in order for that to be the case, you got to do creative things. You can't want to be one of the most creative people, but not create. And so that's why we create Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. We created that about race. Okay, we created the books. Okay, we're creating the sports show. Okay, we're creating because my life is predicated upon creation, but I want to be intentional about what I do create. So it is hard work and it is proper delineation and delegation, but then it's just having brilliant people next to you. Like the fact that I can call you and be like, hey, what you think about this business deal? And I have you as a right-hand woman in regards to business. And I have other people as right-hand women and men in regards to TV and in regards to content. You have to have a great team around you.
If he can do it, you can do it. Thank you. I want to make sure that I wrap this up with 2 key notes that I took away. 1, there's a difference between career and calling. If you're lucky, both intersect. And the second is don't chase money. If you chase excellence, the money will chase you. Thank you so much for joining. This is Influence to Equity. We'll see you next week.